People's minds are often a complex labyrinth, but few have ventured into a maze as dark and twisted as Billy Milligan's. He was a man with not one, not two, but 24 distinct personalities living within him. In the late 1970s, the world was shocked when Billy became the first person in U.S. history to be acquitted of major crimes due to multiple personality disorder, what we now call dissociative identity disorder. But how did this seemingly ordinary man spiral into one of the most notorious criminal cases ever seen? And what really happened inside his fractured mind that led to such horrifying acts? Billy's case is not as simple as it first appears. It's a story wrapped in mental illness, deep trauma, and a legal battle that would forever change how the world sees justice and mental health. If you're fascinated by true crime and the mysteries of the human mind, then this story is going to pull you in. So do me a quick favor, hit the subscribe button below. It's free, and you'll be the first to hear more cases just like this one. Now, let's dive into the extraordinary case of Billy Milligan, the man with 24 personalities. On the evening of October 14, 1997, a college student named Carol Delaire was approaching her car parked near the health center. As she was preparing to leave the campus, a young man with a charming appearance and long curly hair approached her. Given his appearance, she felt no hesitation when he walked towards her. She thought he might need help with something. But the truth was, behind that friendly facade was a sinister plan carefully laid out. As he got closer, Carol sensed something was off. Why was this man hiding his left hand behind his back? And why did every step he took seem to carry a metallic sound? Indeed, when the distance between Carol and the stranger closed to just over an arm's length, he revealed the weapon he had been holding with his left hand, threatening her and forcing her into the car. The metallic sound she heard with each step was the handcuff that bound her wrists, rendering her powerless. Now, everything that happened to her was under his control. As Carol lay terrified in the car, the stranger quickly took the driver's seat and drove her vehicle out of the campus. He headed straight to a desolate area nearby to commit his heinous act. Moreover, after committing his brutal act, he forced Carol to sign a check so he could go to the bank and withdraw money later. When the case was later examined in court, this was considered an additional crime added to his list of charges. It seemed as if this was just a moment when Billy suddenly succumbed to his lust and sought a girl to relieve his urges. But just 8 days later, Billy found his second victim, another female student attending Ohio State University named Donna West. After enduring Billy's crime, Donna reported to the police what she remembered about the perpetrator. She noted a smell and saw that there was some oil residue under his nails, which, although similar in color, she was sure was not the common lubricant. Looking through, there were similarities between the two cases. First, the locations where the perpetrator approached the victims were both near the health center on the Ohio State campus. Second, both victims reported that when he committed the acts, he wore a pair of brown glasses, interrogated them for their home addresses and friends, and threatened them that if they reported to the police, he would retaliate. In just 8 days, 2 girls had become victims of a criminal right within the university, a place that should have been safe. This made all young women incredibly anxious and scared whenever they thought about getting in their cars to move around. Recognizing the seriousness of the issue, the university increased security patrols around the area and arranged for volunteers to accompany female students to reassure them. But despite the girls' vigilance and the school's protection, just a few days later, on October 26th, a third victim appeared. Another young girl of similar age to the previous 2 victims rushed into the local police station to report the crime. The details she reported to the police bore a significant resemblance to the previous 2 cases, prompting law enforcement to act quickly in their investigation. In the prior attacks on Carol and Donna, the police believed the perpetrator to be extremely cautious and experienced in such behaviors. This was evidenced by the fact that he left no traces on the bodies or in the cars of the two girls, and certainly no fingerprints, because both victims affirmed that he wore gloves during the crimes. However, something unexpected happened when the police examined the car of Bowley, the third victim in the case. For some unknown reason, this time the perpetrator left behind 3 complete fingerprints on the steering wheel of the victim's car. After checking and matching the fingerprints against a criminal database, as well as sketching a portrait based on the testimonies of witnesses, the police quickly identified the suspect as William Stanley Milligan, better known as Billy Milligan. The police could quickly match the 3 fingerprints because Billy had previously committed crimes and served nearly 2 years in prison from 1975 to 1977 at the Lebanon Correctional Institution in Ohio for rape and armed robbery. But he showed no signs of remorse, for shortly after being paroled in early 1977, by the end of the year, he reoffended with the same crimes as before. Once the police confirmed the identity of the perpetrator, they quickly planned to apprehend him. They sent an officer to pose as a pizza delivery person to knock on Billy's door. That was a house located in the east side of Columbus. Using a tactic that was not new but highly effective, Billy was completely unsuspecting and immediately opened the door to take the food. However, waiting for him was not a delicious meal, but a team of armed police who quickly took him down. After surveying the house, the police discovered a 9mm gun along with many unused bullets carelessly stored in a plastic bag. But what puzzled the police was that he did not behave like other criminals who had been caught. For other offenders, there are usually 2 reactions, either fear and trembling or stubborn resistance. But Billy was different. He wore a vacant expression and seemed to have no memory of the crimes the police were referring to. Meanwhile, he kept warning the police, "Watch out for the bomb." However, after a thorough inspection, there was no bomb in the box next to the closet as he had mentioned. Moreover, everything in his house appeared to be arranged according to no rules. Strangely, it looked messy, but also very tidy and organized. This made the police quite confused, because if they did not know for sure that he was alone, everyone would think that many people were living in that house together. But amidst all the perplexing details and the arrangement of objects in the house, the police found the most compelling evidence to confirm Billy's presence in the crimes, as it seemed he had a twisted hobby of collecting various trophies after committing his acts, including some driver's licenses and mementos from the victims. Billy's siblings and a few close childhood friends were shocked by the news they received. There was no way they could believe that a gentle guy like Billy could commit such a horrific crime. Even in their minds, they were sure the police had arrested the wrong person. In the subsequent trial, the investigative agency brought forward 3 charges of kidnapping, 3 charges of armed robbery, and 4 charges of rape against Billy. Strangely, he just stood there, looking blank, as if he didn't understand what was happening. It was easy to notice the confused expression on his face. Typically, after being indicted, criminals have the option to hire their own attorney or to have one appointed to them. However, in this case, Billy was deemed to be in a financially destitute state and unable to secure an attorney for himself. Therefore, he had the right to have a public defender appointed to protect his interests. The 2 public defenders assigned at that time were Judy Stevenson and Gary Schweikart. Both were renowned public attorneys known for their courtroom prowess as well as their understanding of criminal psychology. Shortly after being assigned to represent Billy, Gary visited the detention center to talk with him. During their conversation, Gary advised Billy to exercise his right to remain silent and not answer any questions from the police. Sharing Gary's perspective, Judy also visited Billy many times, sometimes alone and other times accompanied by Gary. It seemed that both attorneys shared a common feeling that Billy presented them with a rather peculiar impression. He appeared to be much more elusive than his exterior suggested. The two attorneys sensed something suspicious about this criminal. In addition to preventing him from committing suicide with a piece of the toilet, the prison had to seek the assistance of a mental hospital. He had also painted numerous pictures with varying content, levels of completion, and abilities to complete them. The two lawyers successfully convinced Judge J. Flowers, who was overseeing Billy's case, to allow him to undergo mental health evaluations. This task was assigned to Dorothy Turner, a forensic psychologist working at the Southwest Mental Health Center. When Dorothy first met Billy, she quickly realized that the issues with the criminal in front of her were much more complex than she had imagined. During subsequent visits with Billy, she administered the Rorschach test, a psychological evaluation meant to assess the subject's mental state by having them describe what they see in ink blots. However, the results were not promising. Billy's responses were too fragmented and seemed to lack any coherent connection. In addition to the Rorschach test, Billy underwent numerous other evaluations concerning his physical, psychological, and intellectual capacities. Once again, Billy left the psychologists, attorneys, and investigative team stumped as his evaluation results varied each time. His IQ test results ranged from very low to nearly genius levels. Once, when doctors conducted a brainwave test on Billy, they were astonished to find that the results corresponded to the brain activity of a child just a few years old, much younger than his actual age at that time. After a series of such tests, the investigative team began to recognize the problem. Only two possibilities could explain the results. Either the testing equipment was malfunctioning and yielding inaccurate results, or there was a completely different explanation. That was that Billy's brain, at different times, functioned as different individuals, a condition known as multiple personality disorder. After numerous evaluations of Billy, Dorothy informed the two attorneys that she needed to engage with him more to accurately determine which entity they were speaking to. Each time one of his personalities emerged, he would change his posture, way of sitting, pronunciation, and tone of voice. In this story, there was one person who was not surprised to learn about the presence of multiple personalities within Billy. That was his mother. Long before Billy committed any crimes, his mother had told his siblings that there were two Billys, not just one. The first Billy was obedient and gentle, while the second Billy was mischievous and unruly.
But Billy, the core Billy, is very tender and very sweet. Wouldn't hurt anybody.
Faced with Billy, Dorothy was the first to point out his peculiarities. She suggested that he might be experiencing multiple personality disorder, that is, more than one individual coexisting within the exterior of Billy. This concept of psychological disorder has been discussed since the early 19th century. In fact, psychologists generally agree that each of us possesses different personalities coexisting in one body, but they are familiar with each other and do not have barriers between them, creating a normal person. However, for those diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, these entities are distinctly separated with clear boundaries, and they may not even be aware of each other's existence. This results in those afflicted with this disorder often being unable to maintain a continuous sense of existence, leading to moments when they do not understand why they are in a certain place at a given time. Billy was such a person. Sometimes he would switch personalities after waking from a sleep. But there were also times he would become a different version of himself even while awake. During such times, his eyes would seem to roll back. Afterward, his eyes would tremble and jerk uncontrollably. And suddenly, those speaking to him would distinctly feel that they were conversing with a completely different person. With Dorothy's consultation, Judy and Gary requested that the court permit Billy to undergo further evaluations and assessments to determine whether he could be found not guilty by reason of insanity. There was no reason to deny the request, and Judge Flowers approved it, appointing a well-known psychiatrist in the area, George Harding, to oversee Billy Milligan's case. After examining and meeting with Billy a few times, Dr. Harding reached out to several colleagues to join him and provide an objective opinion on Billy's case. He was convinced that Billy suffered from a mental disorder. During meetings with the psychiatrist, Billy was asked whether there was any possibility that he was pretending to have this disorder to avoid responsibility for the charges he faced. This concern was shared not only by the public and legal authorities, but also by those in the medical field, particularly in the mental health community. Of course, Billy was not the first to be diagnosed with this disorder. Previously, there was a patient named CB who had been treated successfully by integrating all 16 of his personalities into one. This patient was treated by psychiatrist Cornelia Wilbur. In this case, Dr. Wilbur was also consulted to provide the strongest evidence regarding Billy's psychological condition. In a meeting between Billy, his two lawyers, two doctors, and an investigator in March 1978, Billy seemed to be influenced by emotions and thoughts that even he did not fully understand. In this crucial meeting, the lawyers and doctors detailed the personalities of Billy that they had encountered and learned about. There were times they encountered Billy with the personality of David, an 8-year-old boy who held the pain of all the other personalities. At other times, he appeared as a cheerful, lively English boy named Christopher. Sometimes, he became Christine, a 3-year-old girl and Christopher's biological sister. Additionally, there was Alan, the only right-handed personality who smoked cigarettes and was the most communicative. Tommy knew how to play the saxophone and was an expert in electronics and landscape painting. Danny was a shy young man who had a particular fear of men. In contrast to Tommy, Danny never painted landscapes. He only drew still life. Adelana, 19, was a transgender woman responsible for cooking and housekeeping. Reagan was a very strong Yugoslav man, full of hatred and skilled with various weapons, including guns. Arthur was a sophisticated and knowledgeable English boy. He was the first to recognize the existence of the other personalities within Billy and to control them. Finally, there was the personality of Billy Milligan. But this personality seemed to have been in a deep sleep for 7 years since Billy attempted to take his own life at the age of 16. By that time, Billy's mind and body had identified 10 distinct personalities. All of them seemed to be divided into light and dark zones, governed by Arthur and Reagan. In reality, when Billy's personality tried to end his life at 16, Reagan emerged, preventing Billy from waking up again, thus deciding which personality would be revealed to the outside world alongside Arthur. Throughout the 7 years that Billy's personality was asleep, the other remaining personalities went through various phases or even entire events that had a significant impact on his life, such as the death of his best friend, his parents' divorce, and several crimes that led to his conviction. After a few past offenses, he was released and tried to find some manual labor jobs. However, his attempts were futile, as Billy was unable to concentrate on work, always in a daze, and ultimately was fired. On the day Billy attempted to end his life in prison with a toilet, it was also his birthday. On that day, the 3-year-old personality Christine wrote a birthday letter to Billy. Consequently, the personality Arthur allowed Billy to awaken after 7 years of deep slumber. But when he woke up, instead of feeling happy, he felt an overwhelming sense of despair because he completely did not understand why he was in prison at that moment. Perhaps because of his immense pain, he acted recklessly in hopes of escaping this harsh reality. When considering all the characteristics of the 10 personalities at that time, Billy's 2 defense attorneys believed that only Reagan could be the one who committed the sexual assault and robbery cases on the Ohio University campus. Reagan was the only personality capable of owning and using a gun. Ultimately, Reagan admitted to using a gun to threaten and rob the victims, but he refused to take responsibility for the acts of assault. In addition to Reagan, another personality took responsibility for his actions. Adelana, who was 19 years old. This personality had the ability to intervene during parts of the time of the other personalities. That's why Adelana was aware of Billy's criminal behavior. However, due to admitting to the act of sexual assault, Adelana was not allowed to appear by Arthur's permission. With all the strong arguments and evidence, Judy and Gary successfully convinced the court that Billy was not capable of understanding and participating in the trial at that time. Instead, Billy would be transferred to Harding Hospital in the area for psychiatric treatment for 3 months. However, during Billy's treatment, Dr. Harding quickly realized that 3 months would not be enough to cure Billy. He requested an extension and notified a change in the treatment plan. Dr. Harding spoke with the different personalities of Billy, recording all the conversations between the two, and subsequently suggested that personalities Arthur and Reagan agree to allow personality Billy to appear and watch the previous footage. As soon as personality Billy appeared and watched those tapes, he seemed to break down, continuously screaming and not understanding who the people in the footage were. However, after going through a few such instances, Billy gradually accepted the existence of multiple personalities coexisting within him. He began to accept treatment to unify his personalities into one. In August 1978, Dr. Harding submitted a detailed 9-page report about Billy's case to the court, which was accepted as evidence, leading to Billy Milligan being officially declared not guilty due to his mental condition. Instead, Billy would have to continue receiving mandatory psychiatric treatment at the Athens Mental Health Center. During his treatment there, it seemed that his passion for painting was reignited. Many people came to buy his paintings due to his growing fame. It was also during this time that 12 other personalities of Billy were discovered. Phil was a thug with a Brooklyn accent who had committed some minor crimes. Kevin was the one who helped plan a robbery of a drugstore. Walter, an Australian, had excellent navigation skills but was suppressed by Reagan and Arthur because he had once killed a crow. April was only focused on killing her stepfather. She had persuaded Reagan to harm Chalmer, but Arthur stopped that. Samuel was Jewish. Samuel was not allowed to control Milligan's body because he had sold some paintings from the other personalities. Mark was a manual laborer who was quite dull, often just staring at the wall when bored. Steve was one who mimicked others' voices for humorous acts, but this often got Milligan into trouble. Lee was a prankster who didn't care about the consequences of his actions. Jason initially helped relieve the pressure on the entire family of personalities, but later caused too many problems. Bobby always dreamed of going on adventures or solving global crises, but lacked ambition. 4-year-old Sean was deaf. Martin was an arrogant person from New York. Timothy worked at a flower shop until a gay man flirted with him. Since then, Timothy lost control over his body. Additionally, there was one final personality, the teacher. In fact, when treating him psychologically, the doctors wanted to implement a method of merging all of Billy's personalities into one. But in reality, Billy already had a composite personality, which the doctors named the teacher. This was also the most special personality, as it was both Billy's first and last personality. It was Billy before the dissociation, and Billy after all the personalities merged. One could say it was a perfect existence responsible for creating the other personalities, teaching them, and most importantly, this personality could feel the continuous existence over time and space. While still receiving treatment at Harding Hospital, all of Billy's personalities seemed unable to merge into one since the 13 later personalities of Billy had not yet been discovered. This meant that the personalities within Billy's body could not coexist peacefully and blur the boundaries with each other. In other words, Billy could not become a unified being. For cases involving mental and psychological issues in general, and dissociative identity disorder in particular, the most important thing we need to consider is the patient's past. For example, in Billy's case, let's go back to the time when he was a child to better understand the context in which his personalities were formed. From a young age, when Billy's father was just an unknown comedian with a very meager income, compounded by issues of alcoholism, gambling, and betting, his mother had to work extremely hard to pay off her husband's debts. Living in such a family, Billy dissociated into his first personality, Christine, to cut off the memory of the lack of emotional support from his parents. After a short time, when Billy was 4 years old, his parents divorced. His mother later remarried another man. However, this marriage did not make his mother any happier. She even often scolded and insulted him. Billy's second personality emerged after his mother angrily scolded him for breaking a mirror. That was Sean, a congenitally deaf personality. After her second marriage, Billy's mother's marriage failed again, but it didn't take long for her to find and marry a third husband, Carl, a widower with 2 daughters of similar age. But Billy found Carl to be very strange and unpleasant. He always stared at Billy whenever he did anything, which made him very uncomfortable. Moreover, Carl was very strict and rigid in daily life. For example, at meals, one had to sit in exactly one position he dictated with no laughter allowed. When passing spices to others, it had to be done in a specific direction. The worst moment was when Billy was 9 years old. Carl once took Billy to the family livestock pen and committed an act of harassment. He then threatened Billy not to tell his mother about what had happened. Otherwise, he would bury Billy alive under that livestock pen. This was also the moment when all 24 of Billy's personalities formed, and Billy completely lost control over his personalities. Realizing his issue, Billy sought help multiple times and was eventually diagnosed with emotional disturbance. At 15, a year before Billy attempted to end his life by jumping from a high place, he voluntarily entered inpatient treatment for his condition. A year later, when Billy was desperate and acted foolishly, personality Arthur realized he had been in a coma, but upon waking up, he saw life still continuing. He cleverly noticed that there could still be other personalities within Billy. Therefore, Arthur began to carefully observe and record the time, establishing relationships and becoming the controlling personality for the others. During his psychiatric treatment, there were times when Billy seemed to see a bright future for himself, until he received a letter from his biological father stating that the reason for their divorce was due to his mother's multiple infidelities. This directly destroyed Billy's solid defensive wall. Additionally, during this time, a newspaper directed public opinion by digging into Billy's criminal history, leading the public to agree with the label of released rapist, which made Billy's teacher personality seem to want to give up. Moreover, this did not happen just once but twice, leaving Billy in despair as he felt he would never be welcomed back by society. After going through more incidents during his treatment at various psychiatric hospitals, Billy was eventually transferred to the Athens Mental Health Center. Fortunately, despite going through many trials and numerous moments of losing faith in life, all of Billy's personalities once again patiently merged into one, resulting in Billy officially returning to a normal life in 1996. After returning to a normal life, Billy chose to move to California to live a secluded life. He once wanted to rebuild his life into a film, but unfortunately, he was unsuccessful. Later, a newspaper contacted Billy's family for updates, but his sister refused to disclose any information, fearing that the media would disrupt her brother's life once again. In his final years, Billy lived with cancer and passed away in a nursing home in California, reaching the age of 59.